We're just looking at the question of what is coal seam gas. Then I call upon Paul Ferguson, who's been has an interesting history actually, and has a pilot study which might help us think about a little bit more about what is coal seam gas. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, my job is usually to use geophysics to search for groundwater for farmers and help advise them on their land and management of those resources. So I was approached to study this problem, and I've basically set up, my company, Geo9, have devised some methodologies to combine a whole range of geophysics to, at depth, bring to a higher resolution the groundwater models that the coal seam gas companies use. This would entail a lot of calibration over a wide area, basically a resource, a basin-wide area, rather than assessing individual paddocks, which you can't really do because you're looking for conduits, you're looking for pipelines between the lower aquifers and the upper freshwater aquifers. And what I have found out is that when you are actually withdrawing water from these coal seams at depth, what you're doing is you're reducing the hydrostatic pressure around those areas, and the overlying burden of the rock above those, or the stresses, actually arch around those pressure voids, until, that is, those pressure voids actually combine and there's nowhere for the stresses to go. And that's when you get subsidence, and that's what you see when you have your aquifers being contaminated with salt water, because what happens is you get a thing called a bowl of subsidence. You'll have a subsidence of from millimetres to metres, and that will cause fracturing from those coal seams through the overburden and connect up your aquifers. So what we've devised in the pilot study, what we want to actually sink our teeth into, is to be able to map those fractures, those conduits, to monitor these things as a solution, because well, I don't think the future is going to be without coal seam gas. But then again, the trade-off between freshwater aquifers isn't really a very good trade-off either.
On that note,
yes.
Thank you, Paul. Now we're going to move to our second question. So our first question was, what is coal seam gas? Our second question is, where is coal seam gas? Now, we've already heard from Sarah Moles, and she's just going to quickly remind us what she told us about Queensland. Just so we've got our map coming down, we're coming down through the system now, down from Queensland.
So this is the Upper Combine floodplain, not so far from where I live. Our farming systems are extremely sophisticated and high-tech. Our farmers use satellite navigation on their tractors, control traffic, extremely efficient irrigation systems. Next slide, please. This is a gas field, a quite mature gas field, some distance off the floodplain. This is Queensland Gas Corporation's Kenya plant. There's about 70-odd gas wells in that. Each well has about a 1 hectare pad. There's an all-weather road, and they intend to, a different company intends to do similar development to that on that incredibly intensive and precision farming system, and frankly, I cannot see how it will fit, let alone the fact that most of the Upper Combine floodplain had about 1.5 metres of water on top of it during the floods of January last year. So you really have to question its compatibility and its suitability with that kind of farming system in that kind of location.
Thank you, Sarah. One of the reasons we wanted to have Sarah here, apart from the work that she's done with the Lock the Gate campaign, is that we need to be knowing what's happening in Queensland, because that's kind of the first steps in what's happening in coal seam gas. So we need to know that story to know what we need to be careful about. Okay, Rosemary, from the Liverpool Plains.
Hello. We've been experiencing coal seam gas exploration in the Liverpool Plains. At the moment, the New South Wales farm sector and communities are under siege from both mining and coal seam gas sector and its state government agency. Coal seam gas expansion is in advance of science and regulatory frameworks spelling long-term destruction of regional assets and community livelihoods. Is there any precautionary principle involved? No. Under the current Petroleum Act of New South Wales underpins de facto expropriation, basically, in in layman's terms, it's basically government-sponsored theft of our livelihoods, our water, and every other thing. Coal seam gas outruns a minimal, inconsistent and outdated government regulatory framework with no attempt to change. The example is of Eastern Star Gas in the Pilliga State Forest.
Yes.
A conspiracy of courtesy between the state and the coal seam gas companies means that destruction of above and below ground environments proceeds in the absence of any volition by government to understand and act in the public interest. Enter Santos into New South Wales. Buying out the Eastern Star Gas Pilliga project is a platform for the expansion into northwestern New South Wales. It has a heavy reliance on a mediating campaign that ignores the impact on land use in high-value agricultural areas and below-ground impacts on water. Threats to expropriate farm assets under the protection of state legislation, and the split between coal and coal seam gas companies is instructive because at the moment saying that they are no way associated with the coal seam gas companies. Okay, so the next one. What's happening on the ground? The industry is out of control, but fracturing pads. The following slides show that the mining and the coal seam gas industries have been busy. Production and exploration licences are the only growth industry in New South Wales at the moment. We have a very nervous federal government. The Minerals Council is distancing itself from the coal seam gas industry as other mining players. The positives. Community mobilisation in Queensland and following the early resistance from New South Wales are now growing force and rapidly growing in size and intensity of opposition. There is a significantly increased public awareness that cannot be met by the PR campaigns of Santos et al. And the shareholders are all getting twitchy. Where Santos and their government agents are exposed, they sell a furphy that is recognised by 67% of people in New South Wales as defined in a recent survey. They aim to diffuse real anger among communities by PR processes, as they know their processes are destructive. The government agencies and politicians are scared to engage communities on coal seam gas as they cannot provide guarantees on land and water impacts, and they look feeble under the scrutiny of communities. If they invoke legalism, there will be civil disobedience. It's already started. Now, why all the fuss? More than 70% of New South Wales is currently under mineral and petroleum title. They're the current mineral titles. The next one is the current mineral titles and the mineral title applications. The next one is the current, adds coal titles as well. And the next one adds coal title applications. And the next one adds current petroleum titles. So there's actually not much left in New South Wales for a decent living or farmers to produce. And the next one is the petroleum title application as well, illustrating the rivers around which these titles have been granted. What the New South Wales government is doing is nothing transparent or in the public interest. It is unable to move forward to capture a position against entrenched community opposition. The opposition from rapidly growing community anger has them flummoxed. They're in a state of disarray, hiding behind promises of protection and legislation based on a very flawed Queensland model. There are key tipping points: the growing anger across the eastern seaboard with a broad coalition ramping up coordinated activity, expanding and intensifying support from major media, Alan Jones, the Australian newspaper and others, and of course Get Up, which we're delighted to have along. Amendments to Federal Environmental Protection and the Biodiversity Conservation Act, and there's the ongoing failure of the coal seam gas industry to answer simple questions and to explain away the unexplainable. What's actually happened is, we put this together. So this is actually this is the Pilliga Forest, which is the largest temperate woodland in eastern New South Wales. It's a home to a number of endangered species, including the Pilliga mouse, etc. They're all under threat. What the Eastern Star Gas and Santos is actually bidding to buy Eastern Star Gas at the moment. Under threat we have endangered species like the Pilliga mouse, the striped-tailed wallaby, a host of quite rare animals. Eastern Star Gas under Santos is going to put in 550 wells, and those wells have 2 wells each. They're also going to fragment 85,000 hectares of Pilliga forest. One of the issues about the Pilliga forest and its importance to our farming country is that we believe that it brings the trees are naturally attracting the rain, which comes in a sweeping curve across the Liverpool Plains. If we lose out to Pilliga forest, the Liverpool Plains, then it's sort of mild temperate rainfall is going to look pretty sick, sad and sorry. One of the other issues, of course, which the gas companies refused to notice, that in 2002, a bushfire swept through the Pilliga forest. It burned down 185,000 hectares of land in less than 17 hours. Now, you put in some coal seam methane wells, the propensity to leak and the things that coal seam gas companies say that they don't do, and you've got an explosive inferno. Now, that inferno would be expected to be controlled by the local bushfire brigade, and I'm pretty sure that you've all got a local bushfire brigade in your area, and you know it's run by farmers on, fairly reasonably antiquated equipment. For us on the Liverpool Plains, we don't see any prices for coal seam gas, and we get extremely tired of different areas of spin, but I better stop now because otherwise I'll start getting cross. Thank you.